It's my honor to welcome you all to the February, not January, the February, living in the past, the February installment of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. Thank you all very much for joining us. Let's do a round of introductions. We do have a new TAAC member from the Minnesota Council on Disability here. Michelle, I'll let her introduce herself. Let's start with Carrie and then go around.
Carrie Sheldon, Precinct G.
Eric Henderson, Minnesota Council on Disability.
Patty Thorson, Trellis.
Rachel Hawley, Recording Secretary.
David Fenley, I am the chair of TAAC.
Patsy Murphy,
Yeah.
Precinct C.
Richard Rowan,
Somebody's on here.
Michelle Severson, I'm with the Minnesota Council on Disability.
Claudia Fugly, MNCCD.
Awesome. And then I think I heard Sam online.
I'm Jasmine, Precinct A.
Yay. Diane.
Diane Graham-Raff, Trellis.
And then I think there's one more person online, but I can't see a name or a phone number.
I'm on David, Jeff James.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. We do have a quorum. And did I miss anybody online? Just to double check. Perfect. No, Ken is not here yet. But hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. But we do have quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. I would entertain a motion to approve this month's agenda.
So moved. Seconded.
So moved, Jeff James.
Awesome. So we have 3 movements in 4 seconds. Thank you all very much. We'll just go with Richard and then Eric, just because. Richard for the movement and Eric for the second. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
There's no abstentions.
Aye.
Awesome. Unanimous. Thank you all very much. I would also entertain a motion to approve last month's minutes.
Moved.
By Patsy.
Thank you, Patsy.
Second by Patty.
Thank you, Patty. Any discussion? No? Awesome. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Or yes?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Abstentions? Awesome. Thank you very much again. And also, after many, many months of work, we finally have a completed version of the 2024 work plan. It went out a week ago, and there is also a printed copy for you as well. I would entertain a motion to approve as is, knowing that it can change. It is a working document. If things come up and we need to add it or subtract it from the work plan, we can. That being said, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move Patty.
All right.
Said it. Sam, I think, said.
Did you make a motion, Sam?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Is there a second?
I'll second. Oh.
Second, Jeff James.
Y'all can fight over it, or I'll just go to Jeff.
Jeff says he does.
Okay. Just go to Jeff and avoid the battle in the chambers, in the council chambers. Is there any discussion?
Could I just ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Please, yes.
So I know this is a working document, and I think it is a fairly good outline of the agendas and kind of what we had talked about. When would we have opportunities as a committee to maybe move some things around or ask about this approval?
That's actually a really good question, and it leads to something that would like to see more input from TAAC members on agenda setting. So you all can reach out to Darrell and or myself at pretty much any time to get things on the agenda if you want. I'm very much open to TAAC member input. So anytime, really. If you want to put something on for March, just reach out and let us know if you want to move things around. If you think it would be better at a different spot, by all means, let me know.
And then just another follow-up. If this does get amended, would we get another work plan so we could kind of start to look at what's coming up in the future and then.
Yeah, I'm happy to, if you have changes to the working document, I'm happy to make changes and then resend it out. I can also send you just individually the Excel file if you want to kind of toy with it too. I know that you did do that earlier, which I appreciate.
Sure, that'd be
So
good.
yeah, feel free to suggest changes moving forward, or if something comes up that you think is vital for our community and is within the scope of the work that we do here, please, by all means, reach out to myself and or Darrell, and we can add things to the agenda. Any other discussion? Awesome. All right. Well, all in favor, please say aye or yes.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions? Cool. Made it through business quick. All right, so on to the agenda. I think session starts like in a few days. We do have a little update on some of the things that the Metropolitan Council is planning on doing this year, which I expect to be hopefully an uneventful year, but we'll see. I know that spending is probably not going to happen. So Hannah Pallmeyer, by all means, please fill us in, and I'm sure we'll have some questions for you. Welcome.
Great, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the invitation to be here today. My name is Hannah Pallmeyer. I work in government affairs here at the Met Council, and my pronouns are she, her. And yeah, I'm just here to give you a little update on legislative session. As the chair said, session starts in just a few days. It starts on Monday, February 12th, and they will be off and running. So the legislative session this year, as many of you know from our conversations last year, Minnesota has a 2-year legislative session process, and we are entering the second year of that legislative session. The first year is when the budget for the state of Minnesota is set, and then the second year is often seen as more of a year for policy and capital investment conversations, although there can be supplemental budget or tax bills. And last year, although it was a quote-unquote budget year, they also did pass a capital investment package, and they passed a lot of policy too. So it's not always rules, we only do budget 1 year, we only do capital investment another year. So while this coming year is not seen as a budget year, there could be a supplemental budget, but that kind of remains to be seen. And there could be a capital investment bill, and then there will certainly be a lot of policy conversations at the legislature as well. So I know I get invited here, I think, every month during legislative session, so I just wanted to give you a sense of what what the schedule looks like for the next few months. So session starts on February 12th, on Monday. And then the legislative session operates on what are known as deadlines. And so the first deadline is usually the day by which policy bills, kind of non-major spending bills, have to be through all of their committees in one body, so in the House or the Senate. And then generally what happens is there's a second deadline in which those same bills need to go through the committees in the other body. So if you got one of your policy bills through all of the bodies it needs to go, or through all the committees it needs to go to in the House, then you would have usually a week or two to work through those same bills in the Senate. This year, they have decided to combine the first and second deadlines on March 12th. So that means that the legislature has 6 weeks to hear any of the policy bills that they are interested in hearing through the committees in both bodies. So it's a very accelerated process that will likely make it very busy the next 6 weeks for those of us who will be at the Capitol. So basically what that means is that by March 12th, committees in both bodies must act favorably on bills that are not major appropriation or finance bills. And then after that happens, there's a third deadline. And this year, the third committee deadline is April 19th, so about a month after the first and second deadlines. And that is when committees in both bodies must act favorably on the major appropriations bills, any major finance bills. So if there is a supplemental budget, for example, that is the deadline for which those bills must be acted on in both bodies. And then they have roughly another month because the legislature must adjourn by May 20th. So it's a pretty condensed schedule. It's just over 3 months, so kind of 6 weeks for the policy bills, an extra month for any finance bills, and then about a month to wrap it all together and see what we come up with. So I talked a little bit about how there could be a supplemental budget bill. That is still to be determined. The budget forecast in Minnesota happens twice a year. So in the November, it's November and then February. So in the November 2023 forecast, it showed a surplus for the fiscal years 2024 and 2025 at $2.4 billion. So at first blush, that seems like, oh, okay, so they could pass a bill to spend up to that amount. However, what the budget forecast also showed is that there is a projected negative structural balance in the coming biennium of $2.3 billion. So 2.4 billion and 2.3 billion are very similar numbers. And so it's remains to be seen kind of if the legislature is going to kind of shift some of that money so that they are looking at the full 4-year picture for the state. And then what also remains to be seen is the November forecast is just that. It's a forecast that gets updated in February. So we anticipate within the next few weeks that the February forecast will be released, and that will either show, around that amount. It could show that there's more money. It could show that there's less money. And that number that comes out usually around the end of February is the number that the governor and the legislature use to determine any supplemental budget. So at this point, it's kind of too early to say what the supplemental budget will look like, if there will be a supplemental budget, but I hope to have more information to share with you in March. And then as this year is a capital investment year, or otherwise known as a bonding year, I also am excited to share with you that Governor Walz is recommending $37 million to go to the Metropolitan Council to advance bus rapid transit projects. So I know when I was here last year, we talked about, and I don't want to get the number wrong, but last year the legislature also invested in bus rapid transit projects that will help complete the F line and the G line. And this year we are looking for $37 million, which would be going to advance the H line. And that's going to be in the Como and Maryland corridor that would go from Minneapolis to Sunray on the east side of St. Paul. And then any other funds could be used to prioritize work for the J line, the K line, and the L lines, which we don't know what those lines are yet, but they will be prioritized in a plan update that I think is going to be starting sometime next year. And so if we have additional funding from the legislature, that's something that we would consider as well. And I am not our bus rapid transit expert, so bus rapid transit questions I would have to talk to my colleagues about. But just wanted to give you an update that, so you might see that the B line and the E line are going to be under construction this year. So the B line is largely on Lake Street, Marshall, and Selby Avenue in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And then the E line, which is largely in the Hennepin and France corridor, Minneapolis and the southwestern area. They will both be under construction this year in 2024, and that is leveraging past state investments in bus rapid transit, which we are really grateful for. And then in 2023, as I mentioned, the legislature also provided bonding funds for bus rapid transit, and that fully funded the F line, which is up along the Central Avenue track north of Minneapolis, or north of downtown Minneapolis. And then also the G line, which is kind of the Rice-Robert corridor, which will go very close to the building we are in right now. So those lines are on track to be completed in the next several years. And then we're looking for additional funding for the H line, the Como, Maryland route. So Chair, given that we are not yet in legislative session, I think that concludes my updates for you all, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Hannah. Anybody have, Darrell, do you have a question?
I do. Thank Hannah for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to see all the BRT projects that are in the works. I'm excited to hear about the H line. Excited to hear about some of the other lines. I do know that this was a priority of the Walz administration in his first election, and obviously, by the looks of it, it's his priority in the re-election as well. So I'm excited to advance the cause to that, but it's not just BRT. We obviously are hearing a great deal of issues around the safety and securities plan. And are there any additional funds, and how does it, and what do we do? I mean, I noticed we have somebody in the audience from Dakota County. What do we do about, that extension to Robert Street? We know Robert Street, takes a hit all the time, and they have a number of retail shops and restaurants there. I mean, so when does that get relooked at? And obviously, I took the train here on the way here, and I'll tell you, it feels a lot different than it used to. I've taken the train multiple times a week and never had a problem, never been scared, never been thought, well, I should be constantly watching this guy who's using his meth pipe next to me because he's looking in my bag. He's wondering what I have. He's trying to size me up, but I don't want to miss my stop, so I'm paying attention to my stop instead of him. Do I break a conversation with him so that he doesn't attack me, or what do I do? So it's all those things that I have to think about, and that makes me think, well, should I use Metro Mobility because that's door through door and I don't have to deal with some of that? Or should we continue to try to improve our system? And that's why we bring you here every month to give us an update. And I really appreciate your willingness to do that. You would usually dive into something that we can get our teeth around and we can understand. So, I do appreciate that. And I do want to see if you can bring something back and see if there's any way that we can be more active, more proactive with the safety and securities plan. See if there's a way that we can do like a PSA or something that would elevate some of that, and it would cause people to say, at least be nice to the elderly people and the disabled people, and then be nice to the pregnant women, and then be nice to the old guy, and then be nice to the, then we just tend to be nice to everybody eventually.
I think that's a good mentality. So are there any policy or funding proposals surrounding safety? Does that paraphrase you?
Yeah, that would, I guess thanks a lot.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, Chair and Vice Chair, thank you for the question. So so as this year is not a budget, kind of a budget year as it's referred to, I don't know of any budgetary items that are being brought forward to address that at this point. I did want to highlight a few changes that happened during the 2023 session that are still being implemented now. And I think, Metro Transit, I'm sure, would do a much better job of explaining exactly where things are at. But I did want to highlight a few things. So in the 2023 legislative session, the legislature allocated $2 million to the Met Council for reimbursement grants to organizations who are participating in the Transit Service Intervention Project. And the Transit Service Intervention Project was meant to bring together a variety of groups to provide coordinated and high visibility interventions on the light rail that provide for enhanced social services, outreach and engagement, code of conduct conversations, and it did include law enforcement as well. And we provide a monthly report to the legislature about that. And perhaps, Chair, if you're interested, I could share with you the most recent version of that report, which would be from January. And I'm just making a note to myself to do that. So I think that might have some up-to-date information about how that project is going. And then another big change that happened during the 2023, there's a lot of changes. 2023 was a big year.
It was.
But another big change that happened in the 2023 legislative session was that the transportation bill authorized a new 3/4 cent sales tax for the metropolitan area, which just started in October. And what was that?
How much do we have already?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So 17% of the revenue from the 3/4 cent sales tax is being distributed now to counties in the 7-county metro area. And then 83% of that sales tax revenue is distributed to the Metropolitan Council. And of that amount, 5%, and I'm just looking at my notes because it's a lot of numbers. So 5% is allocated to specifically for active transportation projects, which is going to be developed by the Transportation Advisory Board, by TAAC. And then the remaining 95% is used for transit operations, transit maintenance, capital projects. And there's actually a list in the law about what the Met Council should use that sales tax proceeds for. And one of the items specifically that was called out in the statute is about public safety and public safety improvements. So I know that there are plans that are already in the works about how to use that new revenue. And Vice Chair, you had asked how much the revenue we expect to get from that. And in fiscal year 24, it's roughly about $300 million. So Metro Transit, as I said, it's the 95% of the 83% of the 3/4 cent sales tax. So
if I follow you correctly, which I don't do very often, but so if we get 300 million, 83% of that 300 million will be controlled by the Met Council for some maintenance and some other projects, and then 17% of that 300 million will be controlled by organizations or whatever programs you deemed under I believe, I forget, it's not the TAPS program, but it fits under some of those programs, right?
So, Chair, if I could clarify, so the 300 million is of the whole bucket, 17% gets put into the county's budgets.
Yep.
And the 300 million is the 83% that the Met Council receives. And of that, 5% goes to this new process that TAAC will be working on, and 95% goes to transit operations, maintenance, capital projects, public safety, those sorts of initiatives.
Yep. Thanks for the clarification.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try to bring it back to basics just for my own understanding and how we impact this process. It's the start coming up, and I think this was addressed last year when they were closing, but how do we as an advisory committee start to try to lobby or influence some of the policies and budgets that we're seeing from the state when we have priorities here that we talk about? You know, Darrell brought up safety, which we, I think have some purview over in a certain lens, but also like, if we want to push for more funding to implement the ADA transition plan for fixing deficiencies that we already know of. Like, there's a lot of things I think we, advocate for and recognize when we're evaluating our entire agenda throughout the year. And I think, I don't know the clear relationship between our committee. Is it a recommendation to Met Council to say we recommend you advocate and lobby for these changes? Or, and with Hannah here, maybe it's, do we get involved directly with, I just kind of want to clarify that process and keep that in our mind's eye as we're progressing through the year and trying to think more forward. Because a lot of these things is this biennium or it's this 2-year cycle. We have to start thinking ahead a lot more if we're going to start to try to leverage our influence as an advisory committee to the Met Council.
Thank you, Eric. That's actually a really good question, and I think it's good to at least annually clarify what our role is. Obviously, one of the A's in TAAC is advisory. That doesn't mean that the things that we advise on go unheard or unacted on. I've found actually most of the time the Met Council, Metro Transit value what we say and take into consideration and usually implement. That also being said, we do get updates on budgetary stuff, not because we have any control over that money, but it helps us to guide kind of what our priorities might be in terms of making recommendations to the Met Council and Metro Transit. That being said, again, as a body, if we do decide to, take a position on something or support a particular policy or a particular spending proposal, we can do that, with a simple resolution. We can write letters.
I recommend
give you
that.
give me 1 second. I'll jump on it. We can as a body, decide to write letters of recommendation for whatever policy or whatever budgetary proposal may be. And then after that's done, individual members can speak on behalf of TAAC for that particular issue once we all decide upon that as a group.
So
And then, do you want clarification, or do you want Darrell to fill in behind me first? It's
it
up
was
to you.
just going to be a follow-up, but if Darrell, you want to go.
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay. It would be then, I guess then, is it possible to know when is the best time to initiate those types of discussions? If they lead to some sort of resolution or letter, that takes time. So I guess in our schedule, as we just approved our work plan, maybe thought about when we might want to start putting in some of those pieces of conversation or in the agenda so we can start to get some deliverables for things that we may want to address or push for as a committee.
So, and Hannah, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but executive branch level agencies and also the Metropolitan Council usually start working on that like summertime in terms of, because the administration, has to kind of move forward as a cohesive bunch in terms of policy or budgetary proposals, and that's all under the governor's direction. Is that more or less correct?
Yeah, Chair, that is correct. So the Met Council is, we participate in the governor's cabinet, and so we do participate in the governor's process for setting budgetary and policy proposals and priorities for the Metropolitan Council, and that is a process that generally starts, sometime in the summer. There's no kind of set date in advance every year necessarily, but that is kind of historically when we get going.
So if I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just so if you were to receive some sort of, like if it was a official recommendation from the TAAC to the Met Council by early spring, that is something that could be incorporated into, could be evaluated within a reasonable amount of time to see if that's something they also want to push for if it came from this committee? Or is it something where we're looking years in advance where we need to start? I guess you can start as soon as you want, or as you can. That's probably the best approach, but just, when would we have the most impact?
I'm happy to jump on this too, Hannah.
Yes,
Okay. So, we really can do anything at any time. It might not, if we come up with an idea in April, it probably isn't gonna, there probably won't be a bill dropped and passed, first because of deadlines, second because there's a lot of other stuff going on, but that doesn't mean that, it's not a multi-year process and we can't still get things get sort of juices flowing or get ideas rolling. But it's something that we haven't historically been super involved in. And if I think there's interest from TAAC members, I would absolutely love for that to be something that we maybe spend more time and more energy focusing on policy or budgetary proposals that, benefit everyone, including folks with disabilities in the metro. Again, it'd be advisory, but that doesn't mean that we still can't, say, hey, look, Metropolitan Council, hey, look, Chair, hey, Governor, this is kind of this is what our community is pushing for. So I would say anytime. Obviously, some parts of the year better than others to get things done more like that session. That ship maybe hasn't sailed, but it's pretty close to sailing for this session, I'd say. And maybe I'm gonna give Darrell a chance to fill in here.
Sorry about that. I just get really passionate about this because I am a citizen lobbyist. I also lobby for other organizations and as well. I've been with the Met Council working on transit issues for nearly 27 years. So I say the time is anytime you want to get involved, right? And when I get involved in transit proposals, it's usually, I usually start at my local level. I usually talk to my county commissioners. I usually talk to my school board members. I usually talk to my local units of government, right? Because they are the ones that move. They need to move people in and out of their city, in and out of their communities for whatever reason. Sometimes to work, sometimes to play, and sometimes to live, right? So that's where I start. So those conversations that we have that get to Hannah at some point, get to Hannah through a number of organizations like Move Minnesota. We had Move come to our committee a number of times, and they bring their local proposals forward after it's been vetted through in the community. Because we're only an advisory committee, we've not historically been very politically active, and we've been asked not to be at times. But because the governor is who he is, and because we do have a working relationship with the Met Council now, and I think they do give us a little bit of trust, and they are looking at what we say with some sincerity. I think, we have an opportunity to visit something like what I mentioned, like a PSA or something that shines a little bit of light on our committee, and it also forces us to do some of our own homework and build our own relationships outside of this committee. And then we bring those kind of relationships to the table when we vote on things, when we say yay or nay to a particular proposal that they put in front of us. I don't know if that helps, but.
No, it does. We saw the response we got from our priority seating, letter that we sent, and there was action made.
And we did get some action on that, but then it kind of stalled. And
Well-
I'm looking at our standing committees and our updates on our agenda, and priority seating has kind of taken a back seat. But I think if we would bring up priority seating again, it would curb some of the issues that I see daily on some of our vehicles. I mean, some of the issues that I see on our vehicles would clearly be not happening if you guys would play the right messages instead of just reminding people to don't smoke on the train. I mean, how many times can you say, don't smoke on the train when you're going a 5-block radius? It's ridiculous, it's redundant. There's no reason why we play 100,000 messages on our vehicles and nobody pays attention to them. Let's cut down some of the messages. Let's play the appropriate messages, and let's work on the relationships outside of this committee. And let's, because I think we have a good committee here. I think we all want to do something. We're all itching to do something. And I think we have a staff that says, what do you want to do? Tell us what you want to do. And so we got to come up with something that they're going to let us do. I hope that gives you enough to go forward and try to bring something back to us. And I know David likes to put stuff on the agenda, so.
I do like to put things on the agenda, but I also like you all to put things on the agenda. Did you have anything to add, Hannah?
No,
Okay.
Chair, thank
Sorry
you.
about that, Hannah. I
no,
stole your thunder there.
Speech over here.
For those who don't know, Vice Chair Paulsen is at, I see him at the Capitol a lot. So I really appreciate the work that we were able to do this past session and our conversations in the hallways. And I'm just taking notes as well. I think, as the chair said, this is going to be a very quick session. And so we do, we do start our processes pretty early on, but that's not to say that there isn't a role throughout session as well. And yeah, I think it seems to be an internal decision for you all to make, but I'm happy to be a resource if I can.
Just keep coming in and telling us all the great news that's happening at the Capitol.
Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
And tell us some bad news too, please. I know there's got to be some coming sometime.
I'll keep you accurately apprised.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Darrell. All right. Before we move on to the next business item, our council, Metropolitan Council member Liaison is here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. So my name is Anjali Cameron. I'm the Met Council member for District 8. So that includes communities from Brooklyn Center to Edina along 169. So Edina, St. Louis Park, Hopkins, Golden Valley, New Hope, Crystal, Robbinsdale, and Brooklyn Center. I do definitely have a regional body mindset, and so I serve all the communities that the Met Council represents as well. I am the ex officio Met Council member to the TAAC, and I'm really excited about serving with you all on this committee. I am really passionate, particularly on some of the issues around transit accessibility. So one of the other hats that I wear is I'm also a member of the Minnesota Board on Aging. So I'm really passionate about issues related to seniors and transit accessibility. I also work with a nonprofit in my day job that serves South Asian community members. And part of that is also meeting the needs of intersectional communities under that immigrant and refugee umbrella. And so we work with a lot of neurodiverse communities and offer programming in that area as well. And so it is really important. And one of the impetus for me actually joining the Met Council was around transit accessibility for all of our communities and making sure that the services that the Met Council provides is accessible. And I'm using that not in a very broad sense, but that it means so much more than simply the physicality of accessibility, but there's a lot of other barriers that go along with that we want to also address. And if I may, I just want to add a little comment. I apologize for being late to this afternoon's meeting, but I was watching the beginning of this conversation online, and I think one of the things that's really important as we're thinking about how we can improve upon services is really, even before we have that legislative conversation, I think looking at where there are even administrative changes that could be made. And so really working with some of the programmatic leads here at Met Council to make sure, and at Metro Transit, to make sure that maybe it's a more formal feedback process, because a lot of good conversations happens in these meetings. And so having a formal feedback process to gather some of those informal comments that are made, so that then that could be incorporated into the structure of Met Council. And then as Hannah and our legislative team are putting together legislative proposals, some of that will bubble up naturally as part of the legislative process.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming.
Question.
Appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead, Darrell.
What other committees do you serve on?
Thank you, Darrell. And
I've recognized your voice. We've met before.
Right, yeah.
We met before.
At Transportation. So I sit on the Transportation Committee as well as Environmental Services. Then
I've given you updates before,
yeah,
haven't I?
so I've had the opportunity to connect with Darrell before. Then I'm also on the Airports Commission.
Okay.
Both, I mentioned my district, that geography is important because that also includes both the Blue Line and Green Line extension. So I sit on a lot of committees related to those projects. And so those are, I think that's everything. There's also a Places Committee that focuses on artwork related to Southwest LRT that I am also a part of.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you here, and we hope to see more of you. Thank you for coming. All right, Christine, Metro Mobility Program Overview. We love our Metmo numbers here.
I just kicked Sarah's.
I'm sure Sarah deserved it.
She can kick me back in about 30 minutes if I go long. So good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. So I think this is the first quarterly presentation for Metro Mobility Update. It's really an update more than an overview for this committee. You guys don't need an overview so much of our program, but an update on what we're doing. So I did my best to summarize what we're doing and hit on the high-level points. It's a lot of content. I think maybe probably most efficient if we save questions to the end. And I'll try to quickly stay high level on the slides. And then, of course, we can go back anywhere you want to dig into more detail, if that makes sense. Okay. And then we can, of course, have a conversation around next quarter and what you want from me moving forward. So how do I click through? This isn't clicking. Oh, there we go. He needs to advance it. That's right. So this first slide, just a high-level overview, what we are. This is around Metro Mobility Program. I'm speaking to that. I just tacked on our 2023 ridership at the bottom of this. We scored 2.1 million, over 2 million for the first time since 2019. Puts us at one of the largest paratransit service delivery agencies in the country. I think we're right behind New York, Chicago, and LA. Next slide. Profile of our customers from last year. We have about 35,000 eligible customers. About 19,000 of those are active riders, meaning they've taken Metro Mobility at least once in the previous year. About 40% eligible for waiver transportation, about 25% certified with a conditional eligibility, about 30% require use of the lift. And then we offer, of course, guest and personal care attendant rides. And then our service center is responsible for the customer service administration of the program. Next slide, please. Our current fleet is 633 cutaways. We have 31 sedans in the fleet. Our average cost for a new bus is about $140,000. We have a budgeted spare factor of 10%, and on any given operational day, we're right up at that capacity, where the providers are, having drivers come in for the afternoon and they're waiting for a bus to come back. So we're pretty tight on our fleet right now. Our guidance is to retire a fleet after about 5 years, but right now we're pushing high-level mileage on those. We are starting to get some fleet in, but we're pushing high mileage on our existing fleet right now on some of the older buses. Next slide. We have a couple things happening with our service contracts. I think everybody knows we've got a West Zone, an East Zone, and a South Zone contract right now, and they are kind of mid-year contract, but we will be making a decision later this year about what to do with our South Zone contract, whether we want to option the 6th year of the contract or whether we want to go out for proposal for the next. So that decision point is coming in front of us. The East Zone and the West Zone contracts don't term until 2026, so we have a little bit of time on those. The agency contract is terming, though, in September of this year, and that will not be replaced. Instead, I think you know that the Metro Move service is launching this spring, and our contract was awarded to TransDev, and that we are really ramping up transition activities to MTSs, not Metro Mobility, MTSs ramping up transition activities to launch Metro Move in April. We anticipate a large number of current agency customers will choose to transition to Move. If they don't choose to transition to Move, of course, Metro Mobility will continue to serve them in our demand contracts, and we're very invested in closely partnering with the Move staff to make sure that our customers, it's really seamless, whether they choose to move or not, on where they continue to get services after the agency contract is completed. Our premium on demand taxi contract was extended in September of this year through the end of 2024, and that has some extended hours as well that came along with it in September. And so we'll be looking at what would be next then for on-demand services contracts as well. Next slide, please. This slide just speaks to the very high level discussion of ADA service area versus non-ADA, and that'll become a little bit more important later in the presentation. This has been something that our staff thinks about every day for quite a long time now, because we are and have been suffering some constraints with our operating capacity against what had been rising demand post-COVID. And so we're having to really examine that ADA service level compared to our non-ADA service. And I think this committee knows the difference, but I can explain that if needed in detail. Right now, we are in the process of examining what will be our service areas and hours in a couple ways, and I'll get to that later in the presentation. Next slide. This slide speaks to what our what's a change in our performance metrics as it relates to that ADA goal versus our non-ADA goal. We layered in a new metric for our contractors to follow that separates or differentiates, I should say, ADA trips versus non-ADA trips in our performance goals. So what had been a system-wide goal, our contractors now have an ADA goal and a performance goal for their ADA trips and a performance goal for their non-ADA trips. And the reason for that is the Americans with Disabilities Act does not permit transit agencies to have any capacity constraints in ADA paratransit delivery. So as our system as a whole runs up against operational capacity constraints, we must prioritize ADA trips over non-ADA. And the way we did that is by separating or reducing the service quality goal for non-ADA trips to 85% on time for our pickups and our appointment times, while the ADA trips are at a 90%. So that was done to relieve some capacity for service quality, at least, to prioritize ADA trips. That's been in place since November of 2022. Next slide. This is a slide that shows our performance measures overall across the system. And before I speak to this slide, I want to acknowledge the committee has asked for, I think, detailed counts of affected trips within this measure, and I did not come prepared with that information. I frankly just ran out of a little time to do the math. I will send out that to the committee this week yet. I still plan to, but for the purposes of this presentation, we're dealing with percentages, and I do understand that that doesn't necessarily measure the individual trip impact, but this is what we have for you today. But for 2023 overall, what we did is we ran an on-time performance at 89.5% system-wide. That's all trips. A 96.6% for onboard time, maximum onboard time performance, and 86.7% for appointment time performance. And then you see the breakdown by contract below. What's notable is the fact that we did not make the 90%, not even really close with appointment times. And so our contractors have been working, very hard on examining those standing orders, that the service levels and driver schedules as it relates to appointment times, and in some cases, working with individual customers and agencies to try to right set pickup times in order to get people to their appointments on time. Next slide. Okay, thank you. So one of the impacts of our providers having to contend with what have been operational constraints, workforce constraints, fleet availability constraints, and rising demand for ridership post-COVID, and our direction that they must prioritize ADA service, has been them having to pull the lever of denying some trips that are requested for non-ADA trips. And this chart shows you that flow that we've had with that, going back to the beginning of 2022, when ridership really started coming back and workforce levels really didn't to the degree that they needed to. We saw the East contract out of St. Paul really spike with a lot of denials. That was the way in which they were able to manage their capacity in order to meet the ADA requirements. But our West Zone and our South Zone really didn't have to pull that lever. It's just a different dynamic, different operating circumstance. And then we implemented a couple things out of the council. We implemented some driver pay improvements. I think we spoke to this committee about that before. We also, we changed our performance criteria, as I just spoke to in the previous slide, where we dropped the non-ADA trips to 85% and kept the ADA at 90%, and that relieve some pressure. And that worked for a while. We had several quarters where we weren't having any denials in the system at all. We were able to deliver all trips. But then in the fall of this last year, late summer, fall, the West Zone contract in particular started seeing a lot of operational capacity constraints. And so they did pull that lever in order to protect their ADA service or do as best they could. And the non-ADA denials really spiked. You see September, we were at 3,500 denials. Now that's still less than 2% of all trips, but still they did quite a number of customers that were requesting out of the West Zone, requesting trips that were non-ADA rides were getting denied. We've put in a lot of effort with the contractor to increase capacity and do different things with shift schedules and examining standing orders and all of the things that they need to do on the detail level to improve their capacity where they could. And it's seeing some benefit. And as of, knock on wood, and I don't mean to be flippant, I just mean it's been good and we're happy for it. Since January 4th, we have not had a trip denial in the system. Next slide. This slide goes to what were some changes to our taxi contract that were effective September 1st with an amendment. I should point out that not solely because of that, but also because of that, there's been quite a bit of a ridership spike in transit in the taxi zone, on the premium on-demand service. I think 2022, we were just over 40,000 trips, and at the end of 2023, we ended with, actually, the slide could be updated to about 75,000 trips by the end of 2023. So our taxi contract is seeing a lot more activity. We did increase the service hour availability for people who are able to book their trips in advance. We offer extended hours on the weekday and the weekend. We also put in a little stronger language around comparable service for wheelchair accessible vehicle trips. We increased our subsidy from $15 per ride up to $20 per ride. It's paying off. Next slide. And other service options for our customers that I think you're aware of, but I can speak to them with an updated anecdote of success here. We put in a free fares pilot effective July 1st with the legislation in two ways. Metro Transit selected Route 32 and 62 as demonstration routes for their free rides for all customers system-wide. That meant that Metro Mobility trips in the same footprint of the Route 32 and the Route 62 also were delivered free, and we've been able to offer thousands of rides to our Metro Mobility customers for free in the comparable zone. We were able to have our technology respond and identify when the trip is booked that the ride meets that criteria of within that 3/4 mile zone, and it shows up as a free ride in the system. If the driver errors or if the customer tags their go-to card accidentally and a fare is charged, we've set in a structure to automatically reimburse those customers as well, to be confident that those rides in fact are being delivered for free. We also, we're very happy to promote and support our customers being able to ride on the fixed route for free. And we're able to load a free ride pass onto all Metro Mobility ID cards, so that when, customers board a fixed route, bus or rail, anywhere in the system, they can tag and it's a free ride, yet we still get to count the fact that they rode, and that helps us measure success. We are only able to implement the technology for that in October, so we can only really truly count riders that tagged on our system since October, but we've had over 6,000 rides tagged between October and December on that system. And so, of course, we're hoping that it continues to increase, and that also we're able to do some trending of that ridership and those what trips they're taking, high boarding locations, and things like that, so that we can help Metro Transit with projects that improve the accessibility at high boarding locations for our customers. We have re-upped our van subsidy pilot with LifeWorks. What this is we've partnered with LifeWorks to provide them a monthly subsidy for their own transportation of customers to and from their facilities. Basically, there's 2 tiers of compensation that they can achieve each month, depending on how many riders they carry. As long as they carry, 12 people, 15 people on average per day, there's different tiers, we will give them a subsidy for that. And actually, that's been quite successful, and we have quite a number of customers. I don't have the count off the top of my head, but I can get that for you next time, that are being served this way. And so that's successful, and we're looking at where else we can deploy that kind of project. And then we are examining, and we are actually putting together a RFP for next premium on-demand service contract as well. Next slide. I want to spend just a couple minutes on this slide because it's a lot here. And I know this committee is very interested in technology improvements. Not only this committee, but our customer base at large and our drivers really want to see a lot of this stuff put in place. So this quarter, we will be implementing a driver mate pilot. We are at the point where we have a single tablet functioning well, and will likely be in service starting tomorrow if it's not delayed. But it's been a little bit heroic on the IT department side to get it functioning because of how it needs to communicate through our network, our private network. It's all secure, and a lot of information is being transferred, and it has to interface with a lot of other systems. And it has to go through our network and our firewalls and all of that. So it's been quite a project to get it to function, but it is, we completed driver training last week, and it's being, the software, the driver interface is being well received. It's a very simple, almost one-pager of a manifest. It has the comments and the notes right up front for the driver to see. They don't have to scroll anywhere. Very simple arrive, perform options for the drivers right up front. And of course, the big win will be the real-time traffic and Google mapping features. So very excited about that. What we need is we have a 10-bus proof of concept, followed by a secondary install of 50 more. That would be the pilot. And then the successful pilot will lead to a full fleet implementation. Of course, if it's successful, we won't just take it on if we have high standards for performance, but we're very hopeful that we'll be able to replace the Rangers with this product. Then we also have an app version of online booking in queue. We have the scope of work signed off. We have the budget in place, and it just has to wait for people to work on the project and implement it. It's some of the same people working on all of these technology projects, so we just have to fit it into the work plan. But we are ready to go with what would be an app version of online booking. And then service infractions module. What this is it's really a managerial tool, administrative tool that will help provider managers and managers at the council to see and manage service exceptions. So no shows, late trip, not late trips so much, but no shows, cancels at the door, cancel lates, fare non-payments, conduct issues, things that disrupt the service that are not necessarily part of the booking process or part of the capacity, constraint or service delivery process. It's a service exceptions management tool. And then Trip Broker is following behind that, and what that does is would allow for somebody to go in and book a ride in their trapeze, and then have trapeze shop around for the best available trip, whether it be delivered by Metro Mobility Bus, whether it be delivered by the taxi company, whether it be delivered by TransitLink or all other providers. And where we think this is interesting is when we get more than one premium on-demand provider in our system, it can start to look for the best available trip option for our customers if the customer opts in to see more than just Metro Mobility. So you don't have to go to more than one place to see the service options that might be available to you. It's a standard tool. Trapeze offers it. It's in place in other properties. But with just the one taxi contract, we kind of saw it as something helpful, but not anything that really bubbled up to the top for us to work on for a priority. But if we're looking at other premium on-demand service contracts to compete with or operate alongside of our taxi service, we thought that Trip Broker would be a good investment. And so that is on our work plan as well. My personal point of view is that this work plan is aggressive. That's a lot in 2024, and technology projects tend to go a lot slower than we all hope and want them to go. We wish we had magic wands to help us with our tech team. But right now, this is how we're aligning our projects and the priority of those projects. Next slide. So this is a discussion. These next two slides are a discussion of our service area and service maps as it relates to ADA, the ADA zone and the non-ADA zone, and the hours that we provide service as a whole, and how we need to be always following along with the regular route system as it relates to service changes that they make. So in December of 2023, Metro Transit put in place some system changes that we did some analysis on, as we routinely do. And a result of that analysis is that we have some areas that we need to expand our service map in order to be comparable. Most significantly, there is a tiny sliver in Southwest Bloomington and a little kind of circle in the Roseville area, just north of Roseville, that should be ADA instead of non-ADA. So last night we put that into place, and today our website is updated with the updated maps and the interactive tools to show that those particular areas of our service area are no longer not ADA, now they're ADA. Another thing is a number of communities, I think 54 communities, had a span of service expansion of at least 15 minutes. Some more than an hour. And so those changes were put in place as well. So if someone living in any of those communities wants an earlier or a later ride, they're able to do so because we're matching that Metro Transit or the regular route system in areas where that ADA rule is paratransit comparability rule is triggered. What's notable, though, is that also in that service plan, there are some areas that there are contractions. There are reductions in span of service in some ways. And there are some areas of our map that the regular route service no longer meets the criteria for ADA paratransit. But those changes have not gone through that public hearing process, and so we will not be taking on any of those changes until that work is done. I think that's part of the Network Now project that you've been hearing about. So when that resolves, Metro Mobility will go and do that analysis again and do that work. But with all of that said, next slide. There are some changes that we will be communicating soon. MVTA made some changes in September of 2023 that we'll be reacting to because they have gone through their public hearing process and they have no near-term plans to restore the regular route service, but everything in the red area that you see on the map there indicates the portion of our service that no longer meets FTA ADA criteria for complementary paratransit. So what that means is no changes now, but it means I'm working with Sarah to make sure that we have a good communications plan out for our customers. We're identifying customers that might be affected by this change, and then we'll be communicating with them, and then we'll put that communication out, and 6 months later, we would intend to implement the change. It's really important to note that this would not change the Metro Mobility Service area at all. It just changes that it would be non-ADA instead of ADA.
Will you tell us what MVTA is, please?
I'm sorry?
Will you tell us what MVTA is?
Yeah, Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. It's the transit authority that operates the service south in that area, and it is separate from Metropolitan Council.
Is that like when it goes to Burnsville?
Yeah, it's the authority that operates the transit. So they operate on a different schedule and under different authority than Metro Transit, and so.
I think I've taken it to Burnsville to come back.
Yes, yeah, they're branded differently, and it's a different transit authority.
It's a bigger bus.
Thank you, Christine. I just
Actually,
wanted
one more
clarification.
comment on that, but
Okay, go ahead.
because we are the paratransit service for the entirety of the region, what they do with their service also affects our mandate as it relates to the ADA. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's it. 1 minute left for questions.
Nice. That's the end of the?
That was the end of my presentation.
Oh, wow.
I stand for questions, Chair.
I was going for clarification. I didn't realize I actually waited till the end
You
to
did.
ask a question. All right, I'm going to ask two mathematical clarification questions, and then I'll go to the committee. So, just to get rough numbers, to turn the percentages into humans. So 2.1 million would be the denominator. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it
Okay.
includes about the 75,000 rides that are taxi.
Okay, and that also includes 75,000 taxi
Yeah, that's our
rides.
total ridership.
Okay, so we'd have to take 75K off the 2.1 mil when looking at on time.
Yep,
Okay.
and when, yes, exactly, and of course, the math gets more complicated with different denominators when you look at zones.
I won't go into that anymore.
And I plan to send that out, but I wanted to acknowledge that the committee has asked for that, yeah.
I won't go into that anymore just because to get accurate numbers, I think it's better
course.
to have the correct denominator before we start tossing numbers out there.
Of course.
And then, so I did notice where is it here? As it pertains to the agency appointment times at like 26%, is that drawing down the overall appointment performance times?
Not significantly because the
Okay.
contract itself is small.
That's all I have. Do we have questions from Heidi?
Math questions.
You have math questions too? All right, should we just get math questions out of the way?
Brought my calculator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going back to the non-ADA trip denials. It's pretty clear, obviously, the numbers that I'm seeing are for non-ADA trip denials.
They're all, yeah, with the exception of a small handful of errors.
Okay. Is that due to an increase in ADA trip requests or an increase in non-ADA trip requests?
It's really, to be frank, it's a function of reduced operating capacity to meet what has been roughly a slowly rising demand. But frankly, by the third quarter of 2023, the ridership had, while it had been slowly increasing for about a year and a half or so after COVID, it had roughly flattened. And it really is a function of reduced capacity in the West Zone contract in particular.
Okay, because the follow-up I was going to ask is there some kind of event or reason we're seeing the increase in denials in particular seasons in particular zones?
Yeah, you know, I made a comment at a meeting yesterday, there's no one reason, no single silver bullet fix. It really is a broad range of factors, but most significantly it had to do with operator workforce availability and higher than expected, by the contractor, expected attrition. And separations and availability for work in the operator workforce. So what they did to, they just beefed up their hiring and started, you know, running classes of 30 instead of classes of 12, and really tried to get more operators in, get more dispatchers in, get more frontline supervision in to really support what is, just a different dynamic out there.
Is it the same contractor for all these east, west, south?
So the West and the South Zone are both operated by transit team under separate contracts, yes. So it was that provider that suffered the denials this last year. In 2022, it was actually flipped, where it was the East Zone provider, First Transit, that was using the non-ADA denials as a mechanism to manage their capacity. So it just shows you, we're tight, and it takes a lot of kind of micromanagement of the service operation to be able to deliver all the trips. So.
Because, the reason I asked that question was the idea of, is there a way to attenuate over different zones these peaks we're seeing from a particular zone to the next? Or is there flexibility in our contracts that would allow one zone to supply another zone when, if I'm looking at kind of the last quarter in 23, East had no problems. They looked like they were doing well, but then, we had that issue with the West. So, the ability to share resources, that flexibility, is that built in?
No, that's an excellent point. The simple answer is no, it would require an amendment. However, it's too simple to say they were doing okay. They just were able to deliver all trips. They were right at the edge with their ability to do so and stay within their minimums. They were also having to be quite creative and working hard to achieve that. They just chose not to pull the lever of service denials. The West Zone really didn't have a choice. They were under just a little bit of water, just a little bit enough that they had to do some denials. Some things that we did do to try to minimize that is we prioritized for work purpose or for trip purpose the denials. So we really tried not to deny anybody who had a trip purpose for work or for medical appointment. So it was a kind of a hand curated. As best we could, we expanded the parameters of our transit link service to introduce a little bit more capacity onto Metro Mobility by utilizing some transit link drivers and buses where we could. That's a very small service in comparison though, so it added a little bit of capacity, but not a lot. And thankfully, the mitigation strategies that we have put in place have really reduced it, and I think we are now safely around the corner, and now we're looking at really putting our investment in service quality improvement, in particular around appointments, times. And Chair, if there's another minute, there's probably another piece of information I should add on appointment times. Next quarter, when I come to the committee, you'll see a chart that looks very different for appointment times. You'll see a big plummet from the 89% down to probably around 70%. And that's because as of January 1st, we tightened our parameters for what is on time for an appointment to no more than 30 minutes early and no more than 0 minutes late. So the provider really just has a 30-minute window to get there if there's an appointment time. So that means that we're right now using the 30-minute mark instead of what had been a 60-minute mark. 60 minutes early had been on time. Now it's 30 minutes early is on time. We're now only making about just over 60% of those trips on time with a 30-minute measure. So there's a lot of investment our providers are working on right now into trying to get appointment times better.
Thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. Heidi?
One of the things I've noticed, and I've used it a lot, because you can't just take Metro Mobility and then leave when you want to, because certain appointments, because I go to Gillette, and they used to have like a little bus that would take you back down to the hospital, but COVID killed a lot of it, so then you get most of the extra stuff, more rides, more this, more that. But then when I started using the taxi, the will call thing really worked when you have like a weird doctor's appointment where you're going to be there for half a day and then you got to take that. So I highly recommend, and I got friends who really like it because they can be more flexible going to certain things where they're not tied to, I may not be able to go at all,
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be there too early and then the doors aren't open. Or
Yeah.
something. So really work on that. And I live in Dakota County, so I'm a little worried about how you're going to restructure my area. So I just want to be able to have choices where I can live and still take transportation for the rest of my life for you guys with the choices of taxi. But if you do rewrite the system for the taxi, make it really clear for the ones who truly are using it, and I've seen it in the disability community, because a new name will probably throw them off and they have to relearn again, which is not a bad thing, but don't make it so complicated that we can't understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, Chair, Committee Member Heidi, that's an excellent point and understood. Thank you.
Carrie?
Yeah, a couple things. Can you repeat what MVTA means again?
Yes, it's Minnesota Valley Transit Authority.
Valley Transit.
Minnesota Valley Transit Authority.
Yeah, you can take it from the Mall of America to.
Okay, and the next thing is, you were touching up on how the card works and how people, the machine is, the audio thing is telling people to start paying. Otherwise, they're gonna get ticketed either on the train or the bus. But I'm kind of lucky that I take the 3 and the 62, which I don't have to pay for. But when I get on the train, am I gonna have to tap my card or?
No, so as a Metro Mobility certified rider, you are entitled to a free ride on any bus or train at any time. So the way we ask you to show that is to tag your Metro Mobility ID card on the ticket validator on either the bus or the platform so that we know that you are riding, and then you won't be charged because we've loaded behind the scenes.
Okay.
We've loaded a free pass onto every Metro Mobility ID customer's card so that we can, frankly, so that we can ask for you to tag and that we can see that you're riding. But no, if you were to forget one day, just by virtue of the fact that you're a Metro Mobility certified customer, it means you do not owe a fare.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna go to Darrell and then Claudia and then Patsy, and then if there's time, I'll come back to you, Heidi. We're already over. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance.
I'm gonna try to make this quick, and then I can address any questions I have offline with you. The phone system is really, it's been down the last.
The IVR?
Off the last couple weeks tremendously, really bad. Customer service, at least on the, I'm not sure what zone I'm in because I've represented multiple zones over 22 years here, but, so I'm on the east zone, I believe. But at least customer service, at least on that side, and even if you go up to dispatch, is ridiculously horrible. It's atrocious. I mean, and then I know of cases particularly where people will use the online service, the booking service, and that booking, the return will often get canceled, and then the customer gets yelled at, saying that the customer canceled the ride, when we clearly know that that wasn't the case. And then we'll call in, and often if we can get to Andy or to Andy's email, he'll, and if he's able to look at it right away, he'll kind of kick it back and he'll, it will be fixed. But the point is, I guess, over the last probably month and a half or so, morale has been really down within a lot of the drivers and a lot of the way we deal with our customers on the street. And I can say that just on my zone, so I'm not sure about other zones, but I would assume if my zone's like that, other zones are probably similar.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, I'd love to hear specific instances so that we can follow up, and I'll take that back to Andy and the East Contract managers as well. Thank you.
I think those individual concerns are best dealt with online. Thank you, both Darrell. So who does
Yeah,
next?
yeah.
Claudia?
I mean, yeah, exactly. We were able to add staff to our customer service phone lines to try to take.
I guess I did have a question. It did say that your communications were being updated today, right? And you're saying that they got updated, last night or the night before?
That's for the service hours and
That's
service
for
map
service
changes
hours.
in the system.
So when it says in your PowerPoint that communications being updated today, what does that mean?
So the changes that I spoke to around the what is the ADA service map changes and also the service hour changes to reflect the service that was put in place in December by Metro Transit. The updates to the mapping system and the service hours by community that go into Trapeze, so that Trapeze can identify the trip as eligible. That was updated last night. So we had our system down for a couple hours while we updated our maps and our service hour parameters in the Trapeze system.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Claudia.
Couple questions. Some folks asked about they're having problems with re-registering online. Have you heard anything like that? I have no idea.
Re-registering. You mean like their application for certification,
It sounds like
maybe?
they're trying to make an order, but they can't get in for some reason. Would they contact Andy to see what's going on?
Andy is just a single person and he's a manager. I would say if someone's looking for just general customer service support on any issue, they should call our 651-602-1111 number, our customer service call center, and then they're getting one of 7 people that can help them and probably get through faster that way. I'm not sure what they might be referring to.
I'll send them to the 111 number. It's
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
My other one is routing. Is this going to get any better with the routing? There's nothing more frustrating than 2 people from one address going to the same address and having 2 buses.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a common wonderment that our customers have as to why that would be routed that way. The short answer to that question is yes, but the changes might be maybe invisible or transparent to the rider by and large, because By and large, that is a function of dial-a-ride that operates under performance constraint. So they might have to go or route trips a certain way because of the bus availability that they have and that the trips that they have on any given day. But all that said, some of the work that our providers have been doing, especially in the West Zone over the course of the last few months, to try to better match our demand to their operating capacity is exactly that, Claudia, where they're looking at the detail of the batching, the routing of trips, the individual standing orders. Does this trip make sense? They have this appointment times. Does this pickup time make sense? You know, they're really looking in a very detailed way at some of that. Also, the version upgrade that we got for Trapeze last May allows for better tools to dynamically do some auto batching and better routing. So the providers are learning some of the tools of the software as well at the same time, and we're starting to see some improvement there. But I don't know that what you described will ever go away. It's the function of dial-a-ride because, you know, the service day changes every day and they have certain criteria they need to meet for on-time performance. Sometimes they have to deviate to go pick up someone else that to the rider already on board, it doesn't make sense, but to the dispatcher in the seat, it makes sense. And, but your point's well taken. And the other thing that will help technology-wise is getting that real-time traffic, because that will send real-time road information in real time that will affect real-time schedule and changes that dispatch can make. And they won't be so blind as to what might be going on with street speeds or construction and things like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Patsy, last comment and or question.
I thought it was something that you guys, she was talking about that now
It was covered?
No, it's now, the question of what she was saying I had now is.
Floated away.
Well, thank you.
Interrupt me when I've got that and I lose it.
Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And for sticking around a little bit longer. We appreciate it.
Of
I
course.
know this is all.
Thank you, Christine.
All right. Our final agenda item, and I will give you
You give them as much time as we want.
25 minutes since I stole 18 minutes from you. We have a presentation on a regional solicitation survey, and I think an ask for us too. But
Yes.
take it away, introduce yourselves, and take it away, please.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Sarah Maskey. I'm a senior communications consultant here at the council, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm here today, as you said, to talk about the regional solicitation survey. And for those of you who don't know, the regional solicitation is the process that the Met Council uses to determine how to distribute federal funds for regional transportation projects. So this survey that is out there right now, it's called a participatory budgeting, where people get the opportunity to share how they would distribute the funding across the regional solicitation funding categories. And I am joined today by Jaylen Lyles from Zan Associates, and Zan Associates is the consultant that is helping the Met Council on this project. And to give you a reason, I am going to step away when I am done with my part because I have an appointment I need to get to. So just wanted to let you know that in advance and apologize in advance for leaving early. If there are questions that Jaylen cannot answer, I will circle back and try to answer those for you.
So Jaylen, she's not leaving you, I promise. I won't. If she gets up and leaves, I'll make sure our committee is really nice.
I hate to abandon people, but 30-minute window also.
Thanks so much.
Yes, absolutely. So next slide, please. Today I'm going to provide an overview of what the survey is and how we're getting feedback. So Jaylen is then going to talk about some of the preliminary survey results. And I would just add that we've updated those since you got the printed copies and the copies that were delivered. So the numbers will be more current. So you'll see that in the presentation. Next slide, please. So to begin with, I'm going to discuss the survey goal, our target audiences, and strategies that we're using to gain feedback from both partner agencies and residents. Next slide, please. So the goal of the project is to gather input on how to allocate federal funds to support transportation in the region, as we talked about. Next slide, please. And our target audiences for this project are a combination of residents and technical stakeholders like counties and cities, as well as members of Met Council committees like this one. Our public audiences are residents in the region, and we're putting a particular focus on residents who have historically been underrepresented in transportation planning. Next slide, please. So we're using a combination of strategies to get feedback from our target audiences. So we have an online survey, as we've talked about. We're also doing intercept surveys, asking people at existing events in busy areas to take our survey. We've promoted that survey through email, social media, and the Met Council newsletter. We're also doing direct mails to cities, counties, and community-based organizations across the metro area to share our online survey. So we will also have a couple of focus groups that are going to be happening later this month. Next slide, please. So this table shows our strategies that are currently in process. The online survey has been open since November. We're currently doing intercept surveys aiming for one in each of the 7 counties. We completed one intercept survey at Fridley's Winterfest, and as you can imagine, all of the winter festivals are sadly dying on the vine. So we're looking at other opportunities for doing intercept surveys as well as doing one today, which is the ask that we talked about. So after the committee ends, Jaylen and Robbie, who has joined us today, are going to do intercept surveys with the members of this committee. So thank you for that in advance. And then we're, as I said previously, going to add 2 small focus groups later this month. So now I'm going to pass this off to Jaylen to talk about the preliminary results of the survey.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah, Chair, Vice Chair, and the rest of the advisory committee members as well. The following results that I'm going to be presenting have been updated through February 5th, so that'll include the results from our online survey as well as in-person engagement. For this first slide, we have the budget exercise we asked a few folks to allocate $250 amongst transportation program categories in the region solicitation. As users click on the options, each category displays an example image and a description. Next slide. So here we have some county data, and it includes all of the responses we have received from the 7 counties. The following graph shows like the percentages of survey participants that live in each of the counties compared to the population in the region overall in red. For example, as you can see on Anoka County, we have about 20% of our survey participants participated in the survey, whereas 12% are in the region overall. So proportions of the survey participants in Anoka, Carver, Hennepin, and Ramsey exceed or are fairly close to the region overall, while Dakota, Scott, and Washington are on the lower spectrum.
I need to do my homework more.
However, we're planning to reach those 3 different counties and go to like in-person engagement to gather some more information from them.
A quick reminder to folks, the numbers on the screen and the numbers being read auditorily, is that a word? Auditorily to you all, are different than the ones on the page.
Correct.
Because these were printed and emailed out a week ago. This is as of 2 days ago?
Yes,
3 days,
correct.
what's today?
Correct.
2 days ago,
So
okay.
it has updated quite a
That's
bit
interesting
here.
to know.
So that's why you're seeing and hearing different numbers, just letting y'all know that.
There is a discrepancy.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. You have even more up-to-date numbers being presented to you than what's in the packet.
Correct.
So it'd be more than.
Excellent.
Thank you, continue. I just wanted to make sure that folks were like, what's going on here?
No, I appreciate it. So we're going to go on to the next slide here.
Hopefully.
Where's the
Jason,
man
can we get
behind
the
the
next
curtain?
slide, please?
The man behind the
Thank you.
curtain,
There we
thank
go.
you.
So yeah, this one hasn't changed at all. So With the ability among our demographics questions, we also asked survey participants if they live with a disability, and 14% said that they do. And we have about 10% of the region overall that identify living with a disability. Next slide. So here we have the budget exercise results. Everything in blue represents the average funding by category type, giving participants $250 budget, and the green represents the percentage of participants that contributed at least $1 to each category type. So as you can see in the blue, the highest average budget includes transit expansion with $37, increased roadway capacity with $33, and the transit improvements with 31 that have the highest. With the lowest, we have travel choice promotion with $6. In the green, for example, 70% of participants contributed at least $1 to transit expansion with their $250 budget. One big observation, though, in the green is the increase for roadway capacity. Although it's second in the average of funding, it is the lowest that people contributed to on our survey. So that was kind of an interesting find that we found. Next slide. So here we have asked participants also to prioritize different categories using another question. So we asked folks, if you had money to spend on each of the categories, which one would you prioritize the most? So we have 3 project types, including roadways, transit, and pedestrian and bicycle. 5 of them, we had 5 questions for roadways, and then 3 categories for transit and pedestrian and bicycle. So for roadways, we have 40% of participants choose bringing roadways up to current standards. 51% choose transit improvements, and 40% for expansion in the transit projects. And then finally, we have pedestrian and bicycle, where 56% of folks chose multi-use trains and bicycle facilities.
Has it jumped to 70?
Yes, yeah. It switched from 70 to 56.
So we are using the older side.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes. The next slide here. So here we have like our final findings as of the date of the 5th. So the findings we currently have after reviewing the data, transit improvements are highly valued relative to roadway and pedestrian and bicycle project types. After conducting intercept surveys in Fridley, it allowed the project team to target diverse representation in Anoka County. And then finally, we'll also continue to collect data through the end of February here as well as we approach different counties. And that's all I have on our end. Any questions?
Thank you. And yes, we will stand for questions now, and I am still within my time frame.
Yay. I do have 1 or 2 questions. I know Darrell does too, and then we'll jump to the rest, and then we have a few more questions on the committee. So can we go to slide 11 just for clarification? Sure. And reasoning behind why under the same increased roadway capacity, you could have something so high but also so low, and that would be because people are allocating a decent percentage, individual people are allocating a decent percentage of the $250 to increase roadway capacity, but there are a large number of people who don't allocate any amount of their $250 budget to increased roadway capacity. Correct. Is that a correct understanding of that?
So about 47% of the folks that took the survey at least put $1 towards increased roadway capacity.
Okay.
And then the rest of the 53% did not put $1.
Thank you. Just to kind of be able to wrap our heads around percentages and numbers and how these things all work. Darrell, go ahead.
I noticed you mentioned some of the demographics in Anoka County particularly, and how their numbers were a little different, and you wanted to go back and maybe revisit that at some point. I also know that services, how they're rendered from county to county, even though a lot of it's based on a financial formula and an eligibility formula, but priorities from one county versus the other county could be very differently depending on county commissioners, depending on the makeup of how those services are rendered and allocated. So, for instance, I know like in Anoka County, like if I have clients that call me and they have like mental health issues or any issues like that, I know the services in that area are particularly geared to that type of request. But not everybody knows that. So when you go to like Fridley, for example, they might not allocate as much to public transit because when I go to church way out there. And that's like a 4-hour ride on a Sunday on a Metropolitan bus, which is a whole nother story. So we found a church that was closer. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the further you go out, or the further you look at the edge of our system, those answers and those surveys are gonna be very different versus if you go to a concentrated area like along Minneapolis, for instance, or along the I-94 transit corridor.
That's a
gonna be very
really
different.
great point, Darrell. And it's one of the items that the Transportation Advisory Board is always wrestling with is the tension between the priorities. Because as you rightly said, counties have different priorities on expanding roadways, for instance,
Or narrowing them because we want to make the traffic go a little slower, right?
Exactly.
We don't want to run over people in wheelchairs as much.
And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this survey is because we need to have more input into this process. And so we did ask people to identify themselves. So if we have city or county staff that are providing feedback into this survey versus a resident who lives in Anoka County, we know how that breaks down because obviously the technical staff, the engineers and the planners at the city or county level are going to advocate for the types of transportation system improvements that's going to benefit their county the best. So we want to make sure that we're getting a balanced perspective on that.
Right, and I also think the time of day, we've seen that through other surveys when they present to us. The time of day, is very different versus when you do it on the weekends versus during the week.
Right.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a thankless job and everybody likes to tell you what they don't like about transit, but how many times do you get to hear what they like about it?
Right.
Exactly.
All right, we'll go to Michelle and then to Eric.
Can you remind us of the deadlines or goals that you have for this survey? And I'm kind of coming onto this new, but how long are you going to be having the survey out there?
Thank you for that question, Chair and committee members. Right now, we're keeping the survey open through the end of February because we are doing these intercept and focus groups. And so we want to make sure that everybody has the adequate time to be able to participate.
Do you have a goal for how many participants you want in it?
I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but I believe we had about 500 to 600 participants last year. Is that?
Last year, I'm not entirely sure, but currently, right now, we're at 639.
So we're trying to exceed last year is the point.
Thank you.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had mentioned, it's important to get the finger on the pulse, so that's why we come out and do these surveys. We're going to have to look at it through the lens of these 11 buckets, right? Who determined these as the priorities, or where do these priorities come from?
Thank you, Chair, committee members. The priority buckets come through the Transportation Advisory Board. So every 2 years, as the regional solicitation goes through its cycle, they do an evaluation ahead of time, and they talk about the different buckets. And they have changed in recent history, so there are some shifts in where those monies are allocated. So they're the decision-making body as far as which buckets that projects go into.
Okay, so TAB is the one who kind of makes those priorities based on their committee.
That's
and
correct.
just their committee. Because I look at this list of buckets, and obviously as the Accessibility Advisory Committee, I see some things that I would say are missing. Again, it kind of ties in or segues into a conversation we were having earlier about what impacts can this committee have on budget. And I don't see things on this list where people could, put their dollars into safety. I see Safe Routes to School, very particular program in the counties and cities, but not necessarily safety improvements to existing infrastructure or throughout the entire network. I don't see, as what I was kind of mentioning earlier, putting dollars into our existing accessible barriers, things like that. I think it would be did TAB have anyone from the accessibility community as a representative when coming up with any of these buckets?
Thank you, Chair and committee member. What I can say is that those elements are all in the evaluation process. So safety is one category within the evaluation. So once these 127 applications are reviewed by technical committees, they are using a set of criteria that is laid out, and it does include the ADA accessibility. It also includes safety. And I'd be happy to send a link to what those evaluation criteria look like to the committee if that would be helpful.
I guess I would be curious. And then one last thing.
Absolutely.
I won't be able to articulate it as clearly as I think Ken might be able to, because I think he's done a great job at bringing home this point anytime we see it in any presentation or material we see, especially surveys. But about the ability question, is it really the three responses here are the only three responses that a participant to the survey would have, either not living with a disability, living with a disability, prefer not to answer? It is, because I know it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot of layers to the onion of that question, right?
Sure.
And framing it in such a way where it's inclusive and we capture kind of everyone in that. Some people will say, I don't have a disability, but might fall under some of the needs or be able to be representative of, this is where they need the funding, et cetera. So maybe some thought into the next cycle on how to improve the inquiries or questions that are being presented on the survey would be a recommendation.
Thank you. That's great feedback. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Eric. I did have a question on my sheet here on disability definition. I personally kind of like it when it's broad and wide open for folks to either identify or not, but you are correct. There is a social construct that disability is a negative thing, which is silly, but it exists. For the first 25 years of my life, I didn't identify as an individual with a disability, even though I was covered under the ADA definition. So there's a lot of that going on too, a lot of that dynamic. So it's really hard to get at those numbers because that's social constructs are really hard to dismantle in a timely fashion. Heidi.
My question is, are you reaching out, because I hear a lot in transportation, even when we do human services stuff, they're not reaching out to the outer, it's mostly the Twin Cities that gets all this stuff, and so your questions don't get heard more outward, so that's something to think about when you're doing your surveys and stuff. And then the other thing is, when he was bringing up disability stuff, are you also, because the ADA doesn't always think about processing. I have I have a disability and I have a cane and, a forearm crutch, but some of the questions, okay, now I have to, not just my disability, it's not just a wheelchair, it's not just a walker or scooter, it's how my disability can process everything you asked in those questions and then make it work so I can get on a bus and go where I need to go and use the streets. And so the questions you're asking, so are you even looking at that? Because that would also determine how I answer the questions too, because I have to be able to get out the door and see the world in a lens that works for me, but it's not just my ADA type thinking. So just something to think about when you do these questions, because there are people who have autism and brain injuries and learning disabilities where the question might be totally different than a physical type disability or something in a wheelchair. So think of all the different things, even if I have to work with the cars and the streets and the sidewalks and all the different questions you're asking.
Thank you, Chair, committee member. To your first point, we are doing outreach to the cities and counties and to share the survey on our behalf. So we're doing quite a bit of work to try to get it out to all of the areas that is served by the Metropolitan Council in the region. To the second part of your question, thank you. That's a great point. And perhaps next time we do this, we could work with this committee to try to better design the questions so that they are understandable across a wide array of people with ability, no matter what kind of abilities that they have.
Because that will help get real answers to your question, because I use it differently than a person in a wheelchair would, because that's a totally different mindset, you know, as an
I
example.
appreciate that, thank you. And I apologize, I do need to head out. So if there are questions that Jaylen can't answer or Robbie can't pinch hit on, I'm happy to respond later.
I am saving my really weedy, hard questions for after you leave, okay?
Oh, great. I love that.
We're gonna test him. We're gonna test.
Thank you so much for your time today.
But thank you,
Bye, Sarah.
Sarah.
Thank
For
you.
coming.
That was a joke. I don't have any more questions. Do any other committee members have questions or comments? Otherwise, you will be corralled after this meeting and you will be forced to answer survey questions. I'm kidding. You don't have to answer if you don't want to.
I just want to know
Yes, go ahead.
where the survey is, so that
He's gonna ask him afterward. Right?
Yeah, so we actually have, it's currently open on the Met Council website, as well as on social media. It's been posted
Met
throughout.
Council website, okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So on to our subcommittee reports. Did Ken join us online while we've been having presentations? If so, do you have blue line updates? Not sure if Ken was going to be able to come today. I do not hear anything, so I will move on to, did Chris join us online? Oh my gosh,
I don't
nobody's
see
online. No, just
anybody.
Diane. Okay, so neither Chris or Ken joined us online. Darrell, do you have gold line, purple line stuff?
I do have the gold line update. You'll see a lot of work's been done on the I-94 corridor, usually overnight, so we don't usually see it that much or hear about it, but we hear about it a few days later. So they're working very hard to do those things along 94 there. I think that's along the Woodbury area, right, along that side. So they're starting in the part of the project that I get to maybe a couple times a year, but I'm not as familiar with, but definitely I was out there looking at it as well. So, and then as far as the purple line, I will say I'm also involved in a subgroup, a community group called the Purple People, and they've been doing some real community engagement, community organizing, and Colin from our staff and the project staff has presented the Purple Line project, and I think I think as we get closer to public engagement, we roll some of that out this spring, and I think that's a huge opportunity for us to get involved, because that is a BRT project. That's a project that I care about mostly, but I mean, I can get you guys to care about it too. for God's sakes, it's the purple line, right? And why is it the purple line? Because the Minnesota Vikings, our county commissioner, bless her heart, she's retiring after so many years, Victoria Reinhardt. She used her influence with the Federal Transit Authority, and we were able to designate that line as a purple line in our area. So, and if you don't know what that means, whenever we do public transit projects throughout the region or throughout the country, they get designated certain colors, and each color means a certain thing, either to the region or to the level of project or to the type of project it is. So it's a big thing that we were able to secure the purple line for our area, so.
Thank you for those updates. Darrell, are there any members of the public who would wish to make a comment at this time? Seeing none.
Now's your chance. Come on up and say something to us.
No pressure.
She's from Dakota County, so she's from my old county where I originally started in this committee in 2000 from the Ventura administration. So I love Dakota County, so anytime you guys want to come and bug us, please do.
Yes, but no pressure to right now, but we do appreciate you being here. No public comment seen. Are there any members of the committee who would like to make a comment at this time? Diane.
Oh, there's a hand up.
Hi, folks. I just wanted to mention that I am a new member of a group that's part of the Rethinking I-94. So it's not transit specific, but basically I-94 has outlived its current lifespan, and they're looking at, how they want to plan to rebuild it and such. And folks reached out to me because evidently the committee currently has a lot of folks who are currently able-bodied, active bicyclist type folks, and there weren't very many voices for people speaking for older adults or people with disabilities. And so I have also recruited folks from other aging services providers. And so we're hoping to bring that whole kind of age-friendly, disability-friendly approach to that planning. So if anybody's looked at the Rethinking I-94 project and wants to send me their thoughts, you're welcome to do that. It's a monthly meeting, and I'll be going to my first one next week.
Thank you, Diane. That's important. I've looked at that project a little bit, but I definitely have not looked at that project through your eyes. So definitely we need to, after you get a couple months in, please circle back to us and come tell us about it.
Yeah, exciting opportunity for the region. Rethinking I-94, that is. Any other member comment? We have less than 1 minute.
My other member comment would be that, we figure out, it looks like our monthly calendar, our yearly calendar says that we want to do a day at the Capitol, or we want to have some kind of presence at the Capitol. And it looks like that's what we would be discussing in March. So given the fact that Hannah just told us that we're going to have an accelerated, the next 6 weeks, I would suggest that David and I get together and we create a small subgroup and we present a couple dates to them at the end of this month, and we'll just vote on them at the beginning of our March meeting, and then we'll probably, I assume one of the days of action will be on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, something where we can piggyback off of a couple other groups that are already there that would support our issues, so we don't have to be the only ones, looking like we're there, so.
Thank you, Darrell. Yes, Disability Day at the Capitol is quite lively. Lots of people show up, so it's a fun opportunity for folks to see and be heard up at the Capitol.
Can
We
I
have
make
another
that,
comment?
can I make that a motion? Or can we not do motions under member comment?
I would say not under member comment, no, but we can just take it offline and get it done.
And just do it?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Any other member comment? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much. Yeah, we'll